I don't know where to begin with this film, The Marvels. Yes, I've seen it, and I'm going to give you a non-spoiler review. This film is streaming show quality, and when I say quality, I'm using the term loosely. I don't understand what this film was attempting to say or attempting to do. I don't understand its storytelling. Basically, this film is Freaky Friday. Freaky Friday works. Other attempts to do a Freaky Friday work. This one doesn't work. I'm not saying this is totally a Freaky Friday concept, but there are elements of Freaky Friday in it. Apart from that, again, I don't know what they're attempting to do. And even Shield Access Media in their initial reactions, because they're only being allowed to react to it now, that tells you that even Marvel Studios, Kevin Feige, Nia DaCosta, the director, are all embarrassed of this picture. But what sums up New Hollywood, they've known there's been a problem and they've gone back again and again to try and reshoot it and rewrite it. And it hasn't worked. How bad at your job must you be if you've got to make a movie, but you don't know how to go at it? And it's all about their ideology. Let's talk about female representation and inclusion in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but let's widen that scope out. Let's talk about female representation in New Hollywood, or what some of you call it, woke Hollywood, whatever. These people have no idea how to do good female representation and inclusion. Or is it that their ideology stops them from telling good female stories? We've had great, compelling female stories from the moment I was born to now. We had Jodie Foster in The Accused. We had Jodie Foster in Silence of the Lambs. And we've had in television great kind of representation for women when I was growing up. Not much of it, but when it was done well. The problem today that Hollywood doesn't see women as people, it sees them as an entity that must be deemed as flawless. The very problem we saw with Chris Chibnall's interpretation of the first female Doctor. Wrapped her up in cotton wool, didn't elevate her to a character or even a caricature, and in the end she's just standing there because if she does anything, she may make a bad decision. And there lies the problem. And there lies the problem with the Marvels. They're doing it again. They have badly represented 3 female characters in this film. And I mean, like Kamala Khan, is that her name? Anyway, in the Miss Marvel streaming series, which I gave up on after 2 or 3 episodes because I just thought it wasn't for me, at least she had a bit of humour, a bit of personality. I didn't see it here. What they attempted with her in the series worked a lot better than it works in this film. Also, she's with another 2 characters. There is no chemistry between these 3 actors. That's another problem. Because let me tell you what they didn't do when they cast them. Because, as you know, I own my own theatre. I work with an amateur dramatic society in said theatre. And one of the things I do when I'm casting my plays that are just for fun, basically, I do the chemistry. We've got to have chemistry as a bunch of people working together and when people watch us on the stage. Well, when these 3 actors were auditioned, I can promise you none of them did any chemistry reads. That's the problem. All the great chemistry that you see in the history of film and television isn't an accident. They either have to work on it for a long time on television, or in film, they have to make sure they, again, work to get it via good directing and instruction and, the element of good graft by the actors to find that chemistry, or sometimes it's natural and it's found in the casting. None of this was attempted with the Marvels, and this is where the problem is. But for me, if you're going to create an environment of good female representation and inclusion, you've got to treat them how you treat the men and all the other demographics out there that you're going to use. And they're not treated like ordinary people. When you take a character, when you're going to write and develop a character, you've got to ask the fundamental questions. What gets her up in the morning? What motivates her? What's happened to her in her past that's brought her to here? Because your past molds you into the person that you are today. Without your said experiences, you wouldn't be saying what you're saying, you wouldn't be thinking what you're thinking. I'm 51 years old and I know this, everyone. But there's none of that character work that goes on in new entertainment any longer. Instead, they develop three stern characters that are strong and powerful, that don't need no man. Well, I tell you what, I need women. If I'm falling off a building, I'm not going to say, please don't save me, because I don't want to be a damsel in distress, right? But anyway, let's not go there. Let's focus on this movie and this movie's problems. First of all, these characters don't have much of a personality, as I've already said. The chemistry is really, really bad. And the biggest problem, and call me old-fashioned if you want, this film isn't very entertaining. This is a very drab film that doesn't do very much. I think the actors try their best. I think Sam Jackson tries his best when he's on screen, and everybody, no actor reads their lines and says, I can't be bothered to do this. Well, maybe they do, but I believe there's no such actor who stands on the stage and doesn't give 100% because it's their reputation on the line. It's why I always talk about footballers who don't try on the pitch. If that's an actor, an actor will be crucified in the reviews the next day when they're doing a play if they look like they're just honing it in. But yeah, you can't put the responsibility on, bland films like this on the actors. This is a Kevin Feige production. Unfortunately, Kevin Feige productions are not a stamp or mark of quality. They're a stamp of somebody getting a can, putting soup in it, and sealing the can up. It's condensed filmmaking, it's pre-packaged filmmaking of the very lowest quality. One of the problems with film today, it doesn't have that rewatchability element. I loved Everything Everywhere All at Once, but I haven't gone back to rewatch it. That's one of the problems with today's films, but at least that film is a good quality film at the very least. This film doesn't have rewatchability because I barely got through the original viewing. There is nothing here. If you compare this to the first Captain Marvel film, and say whatever you want about the first Captain Marvel film, but at least I understand what it's trying to do. At least it's trying to tell her story. Now, sadly, the first Captain Marvel film has a good concept to it that's poorly executed because they don't want to do enough groundwork. They don't want to do enough, Captain Marvel groundwork in the character. That's what they lack today, and that's why they do bad female representation and inclusion. They talk about girl power, they talk about representation. It's nowhere to be seen in a good, positive way. Because as we all do, we all know many, many women. And, we hear Hollywood talking about seeing yourself on the screen. Well, you may be seeing 3 women on the screen in this film, but they're not like any woman you'll ever meet. And let's be honest, that's the tale. These are 3 ordinary women, right, who happen to have abilities, right? Or at least 2 of them are ordinary. But anyway, you get what I mean, right? But there's no kind of groundedness about their characters. And actually, when you look at New Hollywood and woke Hollywood, when they write female characters and minorities and even a trans character, right? They they're very obsessed with the tag rather than the person. And that's another problem with when they write for females or minorities today. Now, that wasn't the case, back in the day. but they're so self-conscious about the, let's say, the extreme left and third wave feminist rules on how you write for women and how women should be. But that isn't realistic in any context, because third wave feminists, extreme left, don't live in the real world. They don't live in our world. They don't know everyday women. You do, I do, and we know that they don't appear in any Hollywood movie or Hollywood TV show. Women today in entertainment are not relatable to anyone. They're not supposed to be relatable to men, right? Although in the old days, they were supposed to be. Both relatable to men and to women. Let me give you a fine example. Do you remember Dynasty? Do you remember Joan Collins as Alexis? She was a very relatable woman. Yes, she was a super bitch, right? She would do very, very bad things. But if you've grown up like me around the entertainment industry, you would have met women like Alexis all the time. So at least they're relatable in personality and interesting. But when they write women today, they're not thinking about relatability and honesty. So you can't represent a woman properly when you're looking at, a perspective of women that isn't realistic. But this film doesn't really do anything. As I say, the first Captain Marvel film is definitely a lot better than this one. Unlike some people, I never disliked the first Captain Marvel movie. I thought it could have been better. The whole thing in the end about, the guy, telling her to smile and all that nonsense. Yeah, this is part of their propaganda. They think that's good. Female representation. That's what's really funny about this whole situation we're here today. Hollywood think that men like me don't want to see representation and inclusion of minorities and women. That's not true. What upsets us is the false representation and inclusion. You're not doing a good job of representing minorities and women. And you're actually doing them a disservice, and you're gaslighting them. As I discussed, the very ideology that gaslights the trans community and masquerades as allies and has gaslit that community because of the way they talk. It's the same thing here. Brie Larson went on a press conference prior to the first Captain Marvel film being released, slaughtering men my age, right? Now, what's really funny about the Captain Marvel movie, the demographics of going to watch it in theatres were men my age, around 30 to 50. I'm 51, okay, right? But you know what I'm saying. So you literally basically started shaking us, verbally shaking us up and down, and we still went and supported your film. Because the people that you wanted to go to the film, girls and women, didn't go in their droves. It was a bit like the Bros movie, not a lot of gay people were interested in watching Bros. That's why it was a flop. Not many straight people went either, and they attacked straight people for being homophobic and not going to see it. Well, are you actually gonna accuse your own community, Bros person, for not going to watch the film? That tells you something. Then actually a lot of gay people would rather see the old-fashioned type of movies about the old-fashioned type of people. Isn't that what it says? Because we know more gay people went to see Top Gun Maverick than they went to see Bros. What does that tell you? It tells you everything you want to know about the so-called seeing yourself on the big screen. Because you don't represent black people properly. You don't represent women properly. You don't represent minorities properly, right? But back in the day, we had someone like Eddie Murphy playing Axel Foley. Tremendous character, right? A relatable character, right? This is not a stereotyped black man. He's a policeman in Detroit, right? Policeman, whatever, right? But yeah, he's not a criminal or anything, right? But he probably grew up on the streets, right? Nothing wrong with that. But they got it right. When they did representation, it was done right back then. We didn't get much of it, and sometimes it wasn't done well. But I think sometimes they tried, not very much. But obviously we live in an evolved world. Or do we? Have we devolved as a human race Because when I see this film, when I see that there's actually men going to see this film just so they can hate watch it on their YouTube channels, it's kind of depressing. That's not what I want to do. This is not a kind of, oh, let's all laugh at the Marvels because it's going to flop. It's certainly not going to do as well as the previous movie. I don't know what kind of money it's going to make. I think it's going to make about a 70 million domestic opening weekend. I don't know what that means globally, but it's not going to do huge money because Marvel movies don't. Guardians of the Galaxy 3 was deemed as a big hit, but I don't think it made $1 billion. James Gunn has never made $1 billion movie. That's interesting considering he's going to be running DC Universe. Can he finally hit the $1 billion stride with Superman Legacy? There's only one way to find out: when the film is released. But back to the Marvels, yeah. If you want to see this film out of some loyalty, look, I can't sit here and tell you don't go and see this film, right? That's up to you. But what I'm saying to you, this film is like a shell with nothing in it. It's a pointless film. Like many of the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, and this is going back even from phase 1 to 3, there were sometimes Marvel movies that weren't worth watching. And I think because after the first Avengers that the franchise became so popular because of that film, people would go and see the shitty empty shell ones and they'd be, oh well, you know. And nobody ever had the guts to say this was a bad or middling, boring movie. And I think, look, the party is over for the MCU. There's no question about that. And this film really sums it up, because they're now putting out a lot of propaganda. They've released a book where they're talking about maybe, or someone's released a book and written a book about them trying to bring back Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans as Captain America. You can't go back. You can't. You shouldn't go back to a marriage after a divorce. You shouldn't go back. It's never going to be how it was back then. I often sit there going, oh, I wish I could go back in time to 1994 when we were sitting in the beer garden and drinking Hofmeister and smuggling cans into the beer garden. It wouldn't be the same. You can't go back. You can't artificially inseminate something good and recreate it again. There's no fixing the MCU. The only way that Marvel Studios can survive their own bad behavior in bad creativity is to make an official announcement that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is over and they'll just make standalone movies. That's the only way forward. Now, I don't know if James Gunn can make a success of a cinematic universe, but I think they're going to have the same problems, even though James Gunn is trying to be a little bit original, and maybe he can do it, maybe he can succeed. But I think the future of comic book movies and even television is standalone superhero stories. Like the Batman, like the Joker, like hopefully the Constantine sequel from Keanu Reeves and his people. Now that's not officially going to happen yet, but I hope it does. I think DC Elseworlds is the future, and I think Marvel, I don't think they do have an Elseworlds, but that's what they should be doing. Standalone movies. The Marvel Cinematic Universe is dead. You can't save it. And they're talking about bringing in the Fantastic Four and the X-Men into this, existing connected universe. Don't do it. Burn the Marvel Cinematic Universe down and do standalone X-Men movies about each individual X-Men, and then maybe get them to meet together like you did with the Avengers. Fantastic Four, it should be a separate thing. It should just be a separate universe of movies. But the Marvel Cinematic Universe must be burnt to the ground. Well, in a way, with films like the Marvels, I think they already are burning it to the ground. But that's what I'm talking about. When WB and Snyder realised that they couldn't work together with DC, they should have stood there instead of not admitting it publicly and saying, we have had creative differences after BVS. We're going to start again with Joss Whedon and Jeff Johns. Then they could have done their own thing instead of attempting to recycle Zack's work with Justice League, and something good could have come of it. That's the problem with New Hollywood. They're not direct. They're not honest enough. They're so busy on Twitter trying to gauge the opinions. That's what the South Park episode, the Pandaverse, was about. They're trying to pander to everyone, to the woke gang, to people demanding this and demanding that. It's not just that they're trying to pander to one set of people. And that's what the South Park Pandaverse really meant. It wasn't a takedown of Disney or Kathleen Kennedy. It was a takedown of pandering to people you can never please. That's the point. And the Marvels is typical of Hollywood today, trying to please everyone but pleasing no one. There will be people who will pretend that this is The Godfather, that this is a perfection of work from Kevin Feige and his people. Nia DaCosta, the director, had to work remotely with this film in the end as well. That's no way to make a film. It's not a real film, is it? That's not how you make art, and that's the problem. But to be fair, Nia has been leaving us some breadcrumbs along the way in the past 6 months about the process of making this movie. And if you read between the lines, she hasn't been complimentary to Kevin Feige, because these people go to film school. They want to make their own films. But it's interesting, an actor said it yesterday that he went to audition for a Marvel movie, and he said, why should I take this film? And they told him to F off. And, that's where we are today. And what he was saying is, how has superhero films become the pinnacle of an actor's achievements? And that's the problem. That's what's happened today. And that should never have happened. But Marvel have killed cinema because they've created this thing in Hollywood where the cinematic universe was the only thing to do because it made the most money. And every other studio tried to follow them, and they followed them into oblivion. It's a bit like every single studio creating a streaming service following Netflix into oblivion, and now none of them know what to do next, but at least Netflix are still trying to make good content, but even they are reducing the amount of movies they're going to make. Now, Hollywood is in trouble. Entertainment in English-speaking countries is in trouble because they haven't got the right people that want to tell you good stories. Storytelling and entertainment should be about entertainment and education. And when you don't get good education, not truthful education, and it's propaganda, that's problem number one. But when the entertainment isn't there either, like in the Marvels, then you've got a problem. I said earlier that I wouldn't tell you whether you should go and watch this film or not. Well, if you ask me if you should bother to go to see this film, if you're struggling to feed your families, if you don't know where the next packet of cigarettes is coming from, and I shouldn't encourage anyone to smoke, but I'm a smoker myself. And what about that smoking ban in the UK? I ain't going back there again, although they're probably banning it here in Cyprus. We're part of the EU. But anyway, would I advise you to see this film? Genuinely, I wouldn't advise anyone to see this film. It is an utter waste of time. It really is. I am stunned. If Kevin Feige is the genius that brought you like Iron Man, Captain America, Captain America, the First Avenger, the sequel, which was outstanding, Captain America, the Winter Soldier, he brought us some really good films. But we have to ask the question, was it his mind that was truly behind the original, Marvel Cinematic Universe, or were other people propping Kevin Feige up? It's beginning to look like he was propped up by other people. And I always said this. This is why he happened to, make a Civil War movie that was pretty much the same movie as Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice. How? That was an amazing coincidence that both films were very similar. Well, we know the scheduling of shooting for both movies, and we know there's no way that Zack Snyder would ever copy somebody's movie. So somehow he knew what BVS was going to be, and he copied it. He even publicly said that he was worried and intimidated for Marvel in terms of Batman vs Superman, Dawn of Justice and its tone, and wanted to do something similar with Marvel. And what did he do? He did. He made exactly the same movie. And Shield Access Media and critics said that the same movie for Marvel was great, but the same movie for the DCEU and Snyder was bad. That's when you can smell it. That's when you can see it. The corruption of Access Shield Media. And this is what, Snyder fans have been fighting against for a very long time. When we were fighting for the Snyder Cut, they told us it didn't exist. They lied, and they were proven liars. But this film is not worth watching. I don't know what to say to you. It's beyond bland. It's beyond boring. As I say, this is a non-spoiler review. We can't get into the stories. It's just not a good film. It's not a good film because it's not attempting to... I don't know what it's attempting to do. I really don't. I actually think it's just there to waste, 1 hour, 40 minutes or whatever it finally was. It was a short movie that seemed like it was longer than it actually was because the film bored the shit out of me. But to me, it's just, it seems to me it's just trying to, let's fill up the time, the running time, right? And then let's just put the credits at the end. That's what this film does. And, that's when you can feel that a film's a total waste of time. Because this film is a total waste of time. It's wasting your time, the consumer's time. And New Hollywood do this a lot now. There's no passion. There's no artistic integrity. Because there's very few good directors and filmmakers and storytellers out there. The Zack Snyders, Christopher Nolans and the Matt Reeves are very few and far between. And in the end, they will move away from comic book movies. In a way, that's probably a good thing. We're lucky that Reeves and Nolan, we're lucky that Nolan even touched the comic book movie genre, the CBM genre. And he did a great job with it. We're lucky. I feel very fortunate that Zack Snyder made 3 outstanding DC movies. I think he'll move on now with Rebel Moon, and I'm very, very excited to see what he's going to do, because that's going to be Zack Snyder unleashed. But what's not unleashed is the Marvels. If you're looking for good female representation, don't watch this film. If you're a woman, this film insults your intellect and pretends it's representing you, pretends it's your ally. New Hollywood, woke Hollywood, are not the allies of the trans community, the gay community, the black community. Absolutely not. The female community. None of you are getting the representation that you deserve. The representation I would be giving you if I was writing and directing film and television starring women. Because I would take my experience of the women I know. I would work with women so we could do it properly. But we would want to break characters down like I do in my plays and make you proper characters. I wouldn't wrap you in cotton wool and make you flawless because of my somewhat tainted ideology. So you are not being represented, my female friends, as people. You're being represented as objects. The third wave feminists talk about men sexualizing women, but there's a worse objectification today in woke entertainment where women have become another object, an object where there's zero consequences, no characterizations, and that's the worst object to be than being sexualized. Hollywood, the extreme left and the people of today, even the people who have decided to ban smoking in the UK, want us to live in an oasis of thought and behaviour. But we can't live in a world like that because human beings are flawed. We all do bad shit and we all do good shit. And until we understand that, we can't tell great stories about men, women and minorities. And the whole point should be that men, women and minorities should be standing together in movies like Riggs and Murtaugh did in Lethal Weapon. A white man, a black man, getting together, becoming friends. The white man joining the black family. What an amazing story. What a positive message those string of films were, because they did a good job of representation and inclusion. But New Hollywood has no intention of telling stories like that. New Hollywood, the extreme left and third wave feminists, will continue dividing men and women. That's what they really want.